appreciate you tuning in, my friends. I am your host. Well, the Carney government's budget has been tabled, but all the talk of out-of-control spending and carbon taxes has taken a backseat to a political realignment today. The Conservatives have lost their only member from Nova Scotia, Chris d'Entremont, who crossed the floor to join the Liberals. d'Entremont became disgruntled after being denied a prestigious post with the party, but says there's no place for a red Tory in a party led by Pierre Poilievre.
What was the deciding factor in crossing the floor?
I would think over the last number of months, I wasn't feeling that I was aligned with the ideals of what the leader of the opposition had been talking about. So
I know you just spoke of Mr. Poilievre and the direction he was going, but I'm just wondering whether the Conservative leadership style perhaps pushed you out of caucus.
Well, I think that's probably a part of it. I didn't find I was represented there. That my ideals of an Easterner, of a red Tory, quite honestly, of trying to find ways to find solutions and help your community rather than trying to oppose everything that's happening.
So I guess he wanted the leader of the opposition to stop opposing. Anyway, Conservative Michael Cooper says d'Entremont needs to answer to his constituents who voted for a Conservative just last April, only to end up with a Liberal member of Parliament.
All the questions should be for Mr. d'Entremont this morning. I would encourage you to look at his own words about his Prime Minister.
Canadians are hurting. Families are being forced to cut deeply into their grocery budgets just to get by. And frankly, that makes me a little bit angry and a little bit sad. We warned that Liberals, their out-of-control spending and massive deficits were irresponsible. But of course, they didn't listen. And now, after 6 months under a new Prime Minister who promised financial discipline, Canadians are still waiting. He said he'd be judged by the cost at the grocery store. Well, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are judging him, and they are not impressed.
Here we have, as a member of Parliament, and Mr. d'Entremont, who said one thing and is now doing another, who said one thing to his constituents, that he would fight for an affordable budget to provide affordability for Canadians, and that's certainly not what we've seen. I can tell you that, along with my Conservative colleagues, that what we've said we wanted, we were very clear with the Prime Minister, gave him the opportunity to consult and to make adjustments where needed. If we truly are at this turning point, well, I'll tell you what the turning point is. It's more Canadians turning towards food banks because they can't afford to feed themselves.
Well, that puts the governing Liberals just too shy of a majority, and there are questions as to whether other Conservatives might also decide to make the jump. Prime Minister Carney was evasive when asked whether he's courting other potential floor crossers.
How many Conservatives has your caucus approached about joining the Liberal Party?
Well, I'd say the following. First, I want to underscore what I said at the start, how much I admire Chris d'Entremont, appreciate his joining the government caucus, and will speak to anyone, publicly or otherwise, that can support us.
How personally involved have you been in the floor crossing discussions?
And I'll have conversations with anyone.
I know you're willing to talk to anyone, but I'm wondering, are you or any members of your team actually in conversations with other members of the opposition to try to get them to join the
I'm in conversation with you right now, so I can't be talking to anyone else.
Meantime, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre took direct aim at the budget, which posted a deficit of, well, it was 86% higher than the Liberals said it would be. Let's listen to that.
The Liberals have introduced the most costly and largest budget deficit in history outside of COVID. The cost of this Liberal budget will drive up the cost of food, housing, and everything else that Canadians buy. And the Prime Minister has broken every single promise he made just 7 short months ago. He promised a $62 billion deficit. He delivered nearly an $80 billion deficit, $16 billion bigger than he promised and twice the size that his predecessor left behind. He promised to spend less. He's spending $90 billion more, costing $5,400 per family in Canada. And that $90 billion, to the Prime Minister's heckles, is above and beyond the promised $16 billion that he says he will one day find. And if he doesn't find them, it will be over $100 billion in brand new spending. This costly budget forces Canadians to spend more on debt interest than on health care transfers. More than the government collects in GST. That means every dollar the Canadians pay in GST will go to bankers and bondholders instead of to doctors and nurses.
Well, despite pushing the nation's debt to a eye-watering $1.35 trillion, Prime Minister Carney says the budget is prudent.
We've put forward to the House a plan that meets the moment, that manages the federal finances in a prudent, responsible, pragmatic way, gets spending down, and creates this prospect of investment on a scale that we haven't seen for generations.
And now it's up to Parliament to pass the document. We'll see if Carney has the votes to do so. And joining me now is Jonathan Wellum, who is CEO and President of Rocklinc Investment Partners. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Mark. Good to speak with you.
Well, it's the day after the budget. Why don't we just get your blanket impressions of it? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I'm not surprised. I mean, Mark Carney has already signaled that he thinks that Canada is going to develop by top-down government, more state involvement, less private sector, more regulation and taxation. And he's going to direct the economy because he knows best. So that's what we're really getting here. We're getting more and more government spending, more bloated government, bigger deficits. We've got deficits now approaching, in terms of their revelation, $80 billion, more than double what was originally inherited by him. And our overall debt is going to be 1.3 plus trillion dollars. I mean, this is outrageous. We can't afford this. Our interest costs, as you know, are also skyrocketing. They look like they could top 75 to 77 billion dollars going out a couple more years. And that's if interest rates stay low. That's if we don't get a credit rating change by the credit agencies and our cost of money doesn't go up. I mean, it's almost impossible for our cost of money not to be going up. So these numbers are all low. I suspect our debt is going to be higher, and our cost of funding is going to be higher, and is going to just really crimp our economy, and we aren't going to be creating any wealth.
Well, there's some talk of savings. I guess they're going to phase out, 28,000 civil servants by 2028. I think that's not a bad start, but it's all going to be done through attrition. So this is something that's going to take time to happen. And according to their own forecast, by fiscal year 29-30, we're still going to be running a $56 billion deficit. So yeah, I mean, we're inching closer to a $2 trillion debt.
These are structural deficits. These are deficits that are now embedded in the fundamental, spending arrangements of the government, and given the amount of revenue that can come in, we're going to have these shortfalls unless we substantially change the structure of government. So, he's fiddling around and saying he's going to shrink the public sector. Well, of course, the public sector has to be shrunk. You have to take a chainsaw to the public sector. It's much too large. It's bloated. It's been bloated now for the last 10 years. It was probably too large when Stephen Harper was there. And now we've got, so now he's going to just cut it by attrition. These are safe from his perspective. He's not going to jeopardize his public sector vote. And that's why he's doing it this way. But it's not enough. It's too little, too late. We're in a serious financial position, and we're not having the wealth come into the country. The capital is not being attracted. It's going south of the border, and it's leaving. And so the private sector is increasingly getting just strangled by this massive public sector, which gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And if he thinks he knows how to allocate capital in our economy, then we're in big trouble if that's the way he's going to go about it. We need private sector businesses allocating capital based upon return on equity, return on invested capital, and we need to get the government out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, if you believe the fawning coverage in the pages of the Globe and Mail or maybe the CBC, he's made his pitch to private industry to stay in Canada, to invest in Canada, but there's very little in this budget that actually provides any incentive for companies not only to invest here and stay here, but just not leave, because some of these companies, as you know, I mean, Canada has been hemorrhaging tens of billions of dollars in capital over the years. And so you would think there'd be a sense of urgency here. So, we got to keep companies here, and we're competing against the United States. Jurisdictions down there have lower taxes than we do up here, have lower regulatory burdens. They don't have the environmental, the green stipulations that you have to stick to, the rules, and all of that costs money. All of that eats into the profit margin of these companies. There's nothing in this budget in the way of regulatory relief or tax relief, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. And then now the thing is, I mean, I did a study on this just recently and published some work on this. Over the last 10 years, there were 6 dangerous regulatory changes implemented by the Liberal government, which basically chased capital out of the country. And even the best forecasts say that we've missed out on 670 billion plus in capital that would have developed in our resource sector, which is over 1.5 trillion in GDP that we've foregone. Another 670,000 jobs. That's already behind us. Now we're looking at what's going ahead. None of that's changed. These regulations are all in this, all remain, and they put a stranglehold on businesses. And if you can't get something, done in five years or 6 years or something like that, and it's 10, 15, and you're not even sure you're going to get your resource permits and so forth, so you can dig in the ground and get your resources out of the ground, money's not going to come. And so we look at this budget, all he's doing is giving, accelerated, depreciation and so forth on his crony projects, these green projects, these ones that are going to be so-called, carbon capture. He's still all caught up in the whole green agenda and net zero 2050. I mean, Trump has already passed that. He's gone. He's left that one long behind him. They're developing their resources down there, and we're sitting on our hands. So if we think we're going to get capital into this country, there's just no way businesses are going to invest in any significant way, given the little tinkering around the corners, around the edges that he's done in this budget.
I mean, even some of the climate zealots out there, the Bill Gates of the world. I mean, here was a guy who was pushing to have the sun blocked out, to save the planet from climate change. I mean, you see countries like the United States, but others too, just backing away from the lunacy around this whole net zero agenda. And yet here in Canada, we're diehards when it comes to that sort of thing. And it's just terrible news for anybody looking to invest here. So I don't see how this pitch to private industry to continue investing in Canada is going to work. I just don't see how.
Well, it's not going to. We're in the investment business. We talk to companies all the time. I'm heading out to a conference on precious metals and resource companies, and I'm telling you right now, they are not interested in investing more in Canada under these current situations. And so it's going to be very difficult to attract more capital. I mean, it's interesting to see this shift, Bill Gates and so on. And it shows you that what these guys are concerned about is their own pocket and their own power. So it's money and power. Bill Gates now realizes that if we're going to digitize and have EVs and data centers and electrification and all of this, we need more power. We need more energy. And so he can make more money now shifting to developing the energy necessary to digitize and to have all these data centers and develop AI than he can on the green agenda. So now he's shifted over to that. So again, he's gone from one to the other because at the end of the day, the green agenda was overhyped. We don't have a CO2 problem. This is, again, something that's made up by the globalists. And to get more power, we see this, and this has been Carney's pitch. From his book until and also in his last 15, 20 years of his professional life.
And yet there's also a certain amount of unease around this agenda as far as Carney's ongoing relationship with Brookfield, huge company, one that he still is invested heavily in the form of stock options and so forth. And you get the sense that when you're looking at this huge $50 billion allocation of money for infrastructure projects, hospitals, transportation infrastructure, that some of that money is going to end up in the pockets of Brookfield. And by virtue of his investments with that company, that Carney himself would be in a position to profit as well. I mean, does any of that make you uneasy?
I mean, it does. I mean, I've followed Brookfield for many years. I've met Bruce Flatt. I've interacted with him on a number of occasions. I have a great respect for him. Brookfield is a very, very powerful infrastructure company. I mean, they've got over $1 trillion in assets. They've grown rapidly. They're very good at what they do. They're very shrewd, very sophisticated company. So it's almost impossible if there aren't infrastructure projects being offered up in Canada that Brookfield's not going to be on the short list just because of the size. But that does introduce a conflict, and I think that's an unfortunate one from Carney's perspective, and he needs to, again, put some protections around that Otherwise, it will look like he's just lining their pockets, and that is consistent with what we've seen out of Ottawa, especially the Liberal Party. I mean, Trudeau, the scandal after scandal after scandal, when money was going to individuals that were supporters of their party. We saw that with the SNC Lavalin situation. On it goes, right? So, again, we're concerned about that. We're going to be obviously critical of that and watching for that. As Canadians, is our tax dollars going to the right businesses? Are they being responsibly managed? Is there good stewardship going on in Ottawa? And we've seen very little of that, especially with the Liberal government. So it's very disappointing.
And given the lack of cuts in program spending, I mean, to me, it looks like they're just kind of tinkering. You know, they're not taking an axe to spending the way some of us think should have happened. I mean, inevitably, will the government have no choice but to raise taxes on Canadians? I don't see that that's going to be avoided.
I think, well, if it continues down this road, we're going to, again, we've seen this movie before in Canada, not that long ago, in the 90s. I mean, after we had this massive buildup of debt, starting with Pierre Trudeau and then through the Mulroney years, and then ending in sort of the mid-90s, where we had our credit downgraded. Our cost of debt skyrocketed. Our dollar went to 61. We referred to our dollar as a northern peso, and I think that's going to be a good expression if we continue down the road that Carney wants to take us. It will be the northern peso, and it won't be worth much, even to a crummy U.S. dollar. I mean, the U.S. dollar's got problems too, but even compared to that piece of paper, we're going to look even worse. And so we can expect this to continue. And if we can't raise the money in the bond markets because we got too much debt, that's what happened before. Our debt costs went up. Yeah, taxes have to go up, and then they really have to slash the size of government and take this seriously. But until that point, I don't really see them doing this. They just believe they can just continue wallowing in the debt, increasing the deficits, increasing our overall debt, and putting future generations at risk. This is crazy for our own generation, but particular, again, our kids and our grandkids. This is not forward-looking at all. This is actually continuing to destroy the wealth production of Canada and the great nation that we are. We've been endowed, as you know, with massive resources. So we should be one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but we've been hamstrung by terrible politicians on the federal and in many of our provinces also for decades. And this is the result.
Now, we have yet to hear from the bond rating agencies, the Moody's of the world. Are you expecting any word of warning from them, or possibly even a credit downgrade for Canada?
We're going that direction. I'm not sure how fast that will happen. Our debt to GDP at the federal level is still much less than some of our other countries. But you have to be careful in Canada. You have to include our provincial debt. In the United States, the states are not allowed to run large deficits and accumulate debt unless it's for infrastructure projects, for big capital projects. And so what's happened in Canada, like if you take Ontario, for example, Ontario has well over $400 billion debt. Our debt to GDP in Ontario is like 50%. Debt to GDP. Ontario is one of the most indebted sub-sovereign states in the world. It's in terrible shape. So when you add that to our federal debt, that's when you really get a sense of the indebtedness of Canada. It's well over 100% debt to GDP when you include the provinces. Alberta, of course, is somewhat better, but most of our provinces are similar to Ontario. They're in horrible shape. They've been trying to fund, social welfare programs, overpriced hospital systems. Our healthcare systems are all breaking down, and our educational systems are also horrible. I mean, they're not doing the job that they need to be doing. So when you think about on the provincial level across our country, 65% of the provincial budget goes to two things: healthcare and schools. And what do we have to show for it, Mark? I mean, it's just horrible. The spending, the bureaucracy, the inefficiency, ineffectiveness of our politicians. It's amazing Canadians are not demanding more and changing these folks and throwing them out of office. But we continue down this road. Hopefully, God have mercy on us if we continue much longer down this road. We're going to really feel the impact.
Yeah, absolutely. How do people find out more about Rocklinc, the services that you provide over there?
Yeah, we're doing our best to manage around all of this craziness and make sure people's money are in great companies. and in the right spaces. And so we enjoy doing that. Best place to get us is our website, rocklinc.com. That's ROCKLINC, link with a C. And you can just blast us an email at info@rocklinc.com, and we will respond and love to talk to you. So by all means, reach out to us.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jonathan. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. It's great information, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Jonathan Wellum, Rocklinc Investment Partners. And we are joined by Alex Brown, who's a commentator right here on Juno News, and he's also with the National Citizens Coalition. Welcome, Alex.
Mark, thanks for having me. Busy time for everybody here after the budget.
It really is. Now, all the talk was supposed to be about the budget, and yet some of that has been pushed aside in favor of political talk, this realignment that we're seeing, not a major one at first, but it could get worse in terms of floor crossings. We see Chris d'Entremont, a Conservative member, the only one in Nova Scotia now, has vacated and joined the Liberals. How big a blow is that to the Conservative Party? And could we see more of that sort of thing in the days ahead?
Well, yeah, it's a big blow if there's more to come. And from what I'm hearing from sources and from, if one were just to go online right now and engage in the Canadian political discourse, there's rumors of one or two more. And so that's obviously making the minority situation particularly precarious. And so the party has to really thread a needle here to make sure, you're best, advocating for your people and doing right by your principles, but you don't want to take on too much water right now because this government was elected, with a check on its power. That this is a minority situation. And I can tell you from speaking to people in Ottawa, this budget isn't entirely presented out of benevolence. It has all kinds of problems, but much of these policies being put forth and some of these line items, this has more to do with them paying lip service to the fact that they are indeed in a minority situation. If you were to lose that, you could go right back to some of the worst of the Trudeau years very quickly.
All right. So what does Pierre Poilievre do here? I mean, he knows who the possible MPs are that have one foot out the door. Is there something that he can do to, keep them in place? Is that happening, or is their attitude more like, look, if you want to go, go?
It's a mix of both. What I can speak to, and I'm not in the room, President of the National Citizens Coalition, Peter Coleman, put out a release this morning where he is encouraging them to broaden the voices in the party, engaging with media right now beyond just Pierre, to hammer home the budget's glaring omissions, such as no real affordability relief, no serious growth strategies. There's wisdom in showing some patience here, particularly under the threat of these additional floor crossers. So it is not, there's so much to oppose. There's much to be angry about, much to be frustrated about. But I think that, if one were to try to keep a steady head, you can continue to dominate on policy and on the policy front, and dragging the Liberals a bit closer back to the center, and then wait and see how 2026 unfolds.
That the media has not been particularly kind to Pierre Poilievre. They do seem to have it in for him. So this, I think, puts a bit of a target on his back, with the media raising the issue of his leadership. That's the reason why people are leaving. They just can't stand the guy. He's just too conservative. We heard it there with some of the comments by Chris d'Entremont. There's no place for me here as a red Tory. Is this a case where leadership is going to come under scrutiny, and maybe some of the people around Pierre are going to have to talk to him about how he's doing his job? Or do you think he should just keep doing what he's doing?
I think on the youth front, you absolutely keep doing what you're doing, because you've built this unique and unprecedented voter coalition of young people who are really concerned about the direction of the country, and who were not addressed in this budget. There's no way around it. Housing is a disaster. Even liberal housing policy experts are saying it's as if the middle class isn't even supposed to exist in this country anymore. They just want to build these purpose-built sort of Khrushchevkas, these forever rentals, and public housing. They don't actually want to build homes, get out of the way on homes, lower development costs. But tough needle to thread, because there is a red Tory camp right now. We can see it in media. You can hear from these guys every morning. You open up the paper. It's in some ways similar to the federal election dynamic that we witnessed coming from the Ford camp. against the Polyev camp and these sort of warring tribes of consultants, which doesn't serve the Canadian public well in any way. That there is let's go back to maybe a more O'Toole approach. But we also see that these generational problems in the country are so urgent. They're so frustrating for so many people. The Conservatives are putting together such a young team that is going to be communicated in a different way, a less stately way than the public has seen before. And maybe you have to strike a better balance there.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that Pierre Poilievre did very well in the last election. The fact that he didn't win was really due to the collapse of the NDP.
Yeah.
If that hadn't happened, if you had the traditional splits there between the Liberals and NDP, I think we'd be looking at Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre. But the Tories got 41%. I mean, election after election in Canada, if you get 41%, that gives you a pretty solid majority. In this case, it wasn't enough because all the left-wing votes, or a good chunk of them, certainly from the Boomers, coalesced around Mark Carney. I guess they were expecting something different. But
Sorry, I say it all the time where Canada strikes me as a gerontocracy now, where it's there's such those numbers, that 41% is borderline unprecedented, but it wasn't enough. And so now you have to winning is obviously the most important thing. But we've also seen that sometimes when winning is the most important thing to you, as with justified criticisms of, say, again, a government in Ontario, you have to make sure you also govern with principles and you do right by your folks and affordability metrics and all kinds of things like that. And so it's a real concern that they have now. And I just worry, and I don't want them to. I don't want them to give up on this young voter coalition. I don't want them to go back to just speaking tepidly socially and just sort of preaching this kind of lukewarm austerity, this incrementalism that increasingly to young voters looks more like managed decline.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point about younger voters gravitating towards the Conservatives. I mean, when has that ever happened? I mean,
Bizarre. They won the campus vote. Mark, have you ever heard of them winning the campus vote? When I was on campus, I'm in my mid-30s now, increasingly less young. If you mentioned you were a conservative, you'd be hit with rotten produce. Now, I was speaking at UBC last week, and it was a packed lecture hall of young conservatives who were proudly, more traditional in their values, proudly, sick and tired of some of the excess of the last 10 years and the lack of upward social mobility, and they weren't hiding from it. It's changed so much so recently.
Where do you stand on the possibility that we could be headed for a Christmas election? I mean,
I don't think it's going to happen.
okay.
I don't think the parties are well positioned. I think fundraising is not in a terrific place for either party coming out of the election. I don't see war funding on online spending. Cole Hogan, a great conservative politico, he tracks the meta spending, and that's often like a bellwether for where we're headed. The Liberals are not spending big right now. The Conservatives are spending what you'd sort of expect from their digital. I don't know if it would be in anyone's best interest. It could potentially backfire. And if anything, it would potentially best serve the Liberals, who might be able to continue to focus on Trump, as opposed to the myriad of domestic crises that this budget did not even address.
I'm just wondering if the Liberals might stumble and bumble their way into an election a la 1979 with Joe Clark. I mean,
Good
they
point.
don't quite have the vote. I mean, they're close, couple of votes, but the NDP has kind of served notice that they don't like the budget. Now that may mean absolutely nothing, considering what we
Yeah.
saw under Jagmeet Singh. They said they hated the budget, they had problems with it, and voted in favor of it time and time again. I just don't think that the NDP can get away with doing that anymore, given the shellacking they took in the last election. So I think they're very aware that they need to oppose, not just hitch their wagon to the Liberals, or else they're going to be finished as a party. And we know that the Conservatives and the Bloc are not going to vote for them. My understanding is that even the Greens, I don't know how many votes they have, but they are not going to be supporting the budget either. And
Well,
so,
Elizabeth May has come out against it, so that's something.
yeah. Anyway, we'll have to see what happens. And of course, there's the other thing about just the ongoing issue in committee. And I know people don't talk a whole lot about that, but the Liberals are getting shellacked in committee because they don't have the votes. They don't have the Liberals or the NDP voting with them in committee anymore, and they're getting beat in vote after vote and vote inside committee. So you've got the Bloc and NDP teaming up here, and slicing. They're going to slice and dice this budget to the point where it's hardly recognizable from the document that was tabled yesterday. So there's a lot of ifs, ands, and other possibilities in terms of what could happen in the days ahead. What do you think?
I just think it's such a precarious time, and it's a tough time to forecast where we're headed, which is this is a budget that, overpromised and underdelivered. It is not a complete disaster. Obviously, that deficit number is a millstone. There are allusions to more reasonable immigration numbers, which are still far too high, considering we're not building homes and considering our infrastructure is backlogged beyond belief. But they have to navigate some tricky waters here. Maybe they can grab 2 more floor crossers. But as you said, they are still, for this moment, and I think fingers crossed for those who are worried about accountability, they have to work with the other parties. They are, at the behest of the other parties, and they are going to continue to be carved up in committees, and that is a good thing, because this is a moment where we cannot repeat the last 10 years. And from looking at this budget, it sure looks a lot like the last 10 years, which is a big concern.
Absolutely. Alex, I know you have to run. We really appreciate you coming on the show, though. Thank you.
Mark, thanks so much.
Alex Brown, Juno News, National Citizens Coalition. That is it for this edition of Straight Up with Mark Carney. Appreciate you tuning in, my friends. Let's do it again soon. Bye-bye for now.